The day started like any other for the young couple. They were traveling together, ready to board a flight that would take them far away from their home. The woman was pregnant, well into her 7th month. You could easily tell by the way she moved carefully, holding her belly gently as she walked. She was excited but also a little nervous about the trip. Flying when you are pregnant can be a little scary, but she hoped everything would go smoothly. Her husband walked beside her, holding her hand and offering quiet smiles. He was protective and loving, making sure she had everything she needed. They had arrived early at the airport because they wanted to avoid any last-minute rush. The woman's condition made traveling a bit harder, so they planned ahead. When it was time to board, they got in line with other passengers, their carry-on bags close by. The plane was busy, full of people returning home or going on vacation. The couple found their seats and started settling in. The woman carefully placed her bag under the seat in front of her, making sure not to bump her belly. The husband adjusted the overhead compartment, putting their coats and other belongings away. Everything seemed normal at first. The hum of conversations and the occasional sound of luggage being zipped filled the air. Passengers were getting ready for takeoff, some chatting quietly, others looking out the window or scrolling on their phones. The pregnant woman looked around, feeling a mix of excitement and a little worry. She wasn't used to flying often, and being so far from home made her feel a bit uneasy. Suddenly, there was a change in the mood. A flight attendant approached the woman. At first, it seemed like a normal question about luggage or seating. But the woman noticed something different in the attendant's tone, sharp and impatient. The attendant pointed to the overhead bin and asked her to move her bag somewhere else. The woman politely explained that because of her pregnancy, she needed easy access to her things. She asked if she could keep her bag close by, explaining gently that moving around too much was difficult for her. But the attendant did not listen. Instead, she repeated her demand more forcefully, insisting that the bag had to be stored in a different spot. The husband, who had stepped away for a moment, was not around to help. The woman felt a sudden wave of anxiety rise inside her. She tried to stay calm and respectful, but the flight attendant's tone grew harsher. The other passengers nearby began to notice the tension. It was clear the woman was uncomfortable. She held her belly with one hand, taking deep breaths to stay steady. Some people looked worried, but no one said anything at first. The woman's heart was pounding, not just because of the argument, but because she was pregnant and vulnerable. The flight attendant's face showed irritation. Her words became louder and less kind. She questioned why the woman couldn't just follow the rules like everyone else. It felt like she wasn't hearing the woman at all. The situation was more than just about luggage now. It felt personal. The husband returned just then. He saw the look on his wife's face, the fear, the hurt, the confusion. His protective instincts kicked in. He asked what was happening, and the woman tried to explain between shaky breaths. The flight attendant looked at him, then back at the woman, clearly annoyed by their presence. At that moment, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Other passengers whispered among themselves. Some reached for their phones to start recording what was happening. The tension was thick. The woman tried to stay calm, but the way the flight attendant was treating her made it harder. This was supposed to be a simple flight, a journey to a new chapter in their lives. Instead, it was becoming a moment of stress and pain. The pregnant woman clutched her belly tightly, feeling both physical and emotional pressure. Her husband stood by her side, ready to protect and support her in any way he could. The situation was not just about a disagreement anymore. It was about respect, kindness, and understanding. The flight attendant's behavior was hurting someone who was already facing enough challenges. It was a reminder that sometimes people forget to see the human side of others. As the plane prepared to take off, the couple hoped for a peaceful journey. But deep down, they knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The people around them watched closely, realizing that what was happening was not just an argument, but a moment that would stay with them for a long time. The tension inside the airplane grew quickly after the first disagreement. The pregnant woman sat quietly, holding her belly, trying to stay calm. She was tired and scared, but she didn't want to make a scene. She hoped the flight attendant would just calm down and let things go. But the flight attendant wasn't ready to stop. Instead, she started speaking in a loud voice, saying things that made the woman feel even worse. The words weren't just about the rules anymore. They felt sharp, unfair, and sometimes even hurtful. The woman looked around and saw that some passengers were starting to watch closely, sensing that something serious was happening. One passenger near them whispered, "This isn't right." Another quietly took out their phone and began recording. The pregnant woman's heart raced. She didn't want to be the center of attention like this, especially not when she was feeling so vulnerable, but she also knew she couldn't just ignore what was happening. The flight attendant kept pressing her point, insisting the woman move her bag from where it was. The woman tried again to explain, telling her softly that because she was pregnant, she needed to keep her bag close. She said she had important things in it, medicines, snacks, and papers she might need during the flight. Instead of listening, the flight attendant's face tightened. She said the woman was making things difficult for no reason. She told her that the rules were the rules and everyone had to follow them, no exceptions. The woman tried to stay calm, but inside she felt something break. She felt small and ignored. Her body was already carrying a new life, and now it felt like she was carrying a heavy weight of unfairness too. Passengers nearby looked uncomfortable. Some moved their eyes away, not wanting to get involved. Others whispered among themselves, confused and upset by what they saw. The pregnant woman's husband stood silently by her side, his face serious and tense. He could see the pain on his wife's face and felt anger growing inside him. The flight attendant took a step closer, her voice still sharp. She told the woman that she should be grateful for a seat at all. She said that she was holding up the flight, making the job harder for the crew. It was clear now that the woman was being treated differently, not because of the rules but because of something else. The way the flight attendant looked at her showed no kindness or care. The pregnant woman's hands trembled slightly as she reached out to hold her husband's arm. She whispered, "Please, can we just get through this?" The husband nodded and said quietly, "I'm here. I won't let this happen." Suddenly, the woman felt a small, sharp push. The flight attendant had reached out and hit her lightly on the arm, just enough to startle her. It was not hard, but it was enough to make the woman freeze. The pain wasn't only physical. It was the shock of being treated that way, especially when she was pregnant and already scared. Gasps came from nearby passengers. A few people started to stand up, some looking shocked and others angry. One woman said loudly, "That's not okay." Another man pulled out his phone and started recording even more carefully. The flight attendant stepped back but didn't say sorry. Instead, she looked around like she expected someone to support her. The pregnant woman's husband moved closer, his eyes burning with anger and worry. He put his arm around his wife, shielding her from the flight attendant. He told her softly, "You're safe now. I'm right here." The flight attendant rolled her eyes and walked away, but the damage was done. The woman was shaking slightly, tears forming in her eyes. She tried to steady her breath, but she was scared. She was worried about her baby and what this meant for the rest of the flight. A passenger who was a nurse stood up and came over. She gently asked the woman if she was okay. She checked her pulse and offered words of comfort. The nurse said, "We're here for you. You're not alone." The husband thanked the nurse quietly. He looked around and saw many passengers were whispering, some nodding in support, others still unsure of what to do. The plane felt different now, heavier, filled with tension but also with hope. Hope that something would change, that this moment wouldn't be forgotten. The woman looked at her husband and saw his face calm but serious. He wasn't just upset. He was ready to do something. She felt a small spark of courage herself. Together, they would face this. She wasn't just a passenger on a plane anymore. She was a mother, a woman who deserved respect and kindness. Around them, the cabin was quiet except for soft whispers and the low hum of the plane's engines. The flight attendant who had caused the trouble now avoided looking their way. Other crew members seemed uncomfortable but didn't step in. It was clear that no one wanted to get involved or make the situation worse. The husband pulled out his phone and dialed a number quietly. The pregnant woman watched him, curious and hopeful. She didn't know who he was calling, but she trusted him. He spoke calmly and clearly, explaining the situation. His voice was steady but firm, making sure the person on the other end understood exactly what was happening. As the call ended, the husband looked determined. He told his wife, "The help is on the way. This won't be ignored." She smiled weakly and squeezed his hand. Even though her body was tired, her spirit was strong. The couple sat together feeling a mix of fear and relief. They didn't know what would happen next, but they knew they weren't alone anymore. The passengers around them were watching, waiting, and hoping for justice. In that moment, the pregnant woman realized that sometimes difficult moments show who people really are. Some choose to turn away, but others stand up. She felt grateful for the quiet support she could see around her. The plane was still on the ground, but the journey had already changed. What was supposed to be just a flight had become a test of courage, kindness, and fairness. And this was only the beginning. The cabin was tense. The air felt thick with silence and quiet whispers. Everyone seemed to be watching what would happen next. The pregnant woman sat carefully, her hands still resting protectively on her belly. Her husband stayed close, never letting go of her side. Both of them were calm on the surface, but inside they felt a storm of emotions, fear, anger, and hope all mixed together. Passengers around them looked uncomfortable. Some avoided eye contact, unsure if they should get involved. Others exchanged worried glances, feeling like they had just witnessed something unfair but not knowing what to do. A few brave souls pulled out their phones, recording what had happened, hoping that these videos might help if things went wrong. The flight attendant who had caused the problem was nowhere to be seen at the moment. She had stepped away but could still be heard speaking quietly to other crew members near the back of the plane. The other flight attendants didn't seem eager to help the pregnant woman or her husband. They looked uneasy, but nobody stepped forward. The pregnant woman felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the flight attendant was no longer standing so close, but sadness because no one else was standing up for her. She tried to take deep breaths to calm her nerves, but the fear for her baby's safety was still strong. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the aisle. The cabin crew leader, the captain, and one other flight attendant approached the couple. The captain had a serious look on his face, but there was a distance in his eyes. He spoke softly but clearly. "We understand there has been some misunderstanding," he said. "We want to make sure you are okay and that you feel safe on this flight." His words sounded polite, but there was little warmth in his voice. The pregnant woman looked at her husband. She wasn't sure if the captain really cared or was just saying what he was supposed to say. She felt tired. She wanted someone to truly understand what she had just gone through. Her husband spoke up calmly but firmly. She was treated unfairly. She was pushed and spoken to in a way no one should be, especially not a pregnant woman. "This isn't just about luggage or rules, it's about respect." The captain nodded, but the tension in the cabin didn't ease. He promised to check the situation and make sure it didn't happen again, but it felt like empty words to the couple. Meanwhile, a nurse passenger had moved closer and stayed by the woman's side. She kept gently asking if the woman was feeling okay and if she needed anything. The nurse checked the woman's pulse and asked if she felt dizzy or uncomfortable. The woman shook her head but was grateful for the kindness. Other passengers started speaking quietly among themselves. Some said they wanted to help but didn't know how. Others shared stories about times they had seen unfair treatment. And the room felt heavier with the weight of unspoken truths. The pregnant woman and her husband stayed close, knowing they couldn't rely on the crew alone. Her husband took out his phone again and quietly dialed a number. The woman wasn't sure who he was calling, but she trusted him. His voice was calm and clear as he explained what had happened. Passengers nearby watched him, some nodding in silent support. It was clear that this man wasn't going to let the matter slide. He was determined to make sure the truth was heard and the right actions were taken. As the call ended, the husband looked at his wife and whispered, "Help is coming." She gave him a small, tired smile. For the first time since the incident began, she felt a flicker of hope. Minutes passed slowly. The captain and crew spoke quietly among themselves but didn't approach the couple again. The pregnant woman wondered if anyone really cared or if this was just another moment to be forgotten. Suddenly, the captain's radio crackled. A voice from the ground spoke quickly and firmly. The captain nodded and turned to the couple. "Sir, ma'am," he said, "there has been a report sent from the airline's headquarters. They have instructed us to stop the flight preparations and investigate the matter immediately." Passengers looked around, surprised. A few whispered, "Finally." The tension shifted slightly, this time with a sense of justice beginning to take shape. The pregnant woman's husband stood tall, his eyes steady. He told his wife quietly, "This is going to change." Soon after, airport security and airline representatives arrived at the gate. They boarded the plane and moved directly toward the front where the crew was. The captain explained the situation to them in a low voice. The couple watched as the flight attendant who had pushed the woman was asked to leave the plane along with the other crew members. It was a shock to the passengers. Some clapped quietly. Others took out their phones to capture the moment. The pregnant woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. She looked at her husband and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for standing up for me," she whispered. He smiled and said, "You don't have to thank me. We are in this together." The airline quickly brought in a new crew to take over the flight. The couple was moved to more comfortable seats near the front, and the nurse stayed close, offering support and reassurance. The cabin felt lighter now, filled with a new sense of hope and respect. Passengers who had watched the incident unfold shared quiet conversations about fairness, kindness, and standing up for what is right. The pregnant woman rested her head on her husband's shoulder, feeling safe for the first time in hours. Though the journey had been difficult, they knew they had helped make a change. This was not just a flight anymore. It was a story about courage, standing up against unfair treatment, and protecting those who are most vulnerable. And as the plane finally prepared to take off, the couple held hands tightly, ready to face the next part of their journey, together. When the husband returned to the plane after stepping away briefly, he noticed the change in the atmosphere right away. The mood felt heavier, tense, and filled with discomfort. The look on his wife's face told him everything. She was shaken, scared, and hurt. He could see the worry in her eyes, the way she kept holding her belly protectively. Something was wrong, and he needed to find out what had happened. As he walked closer, passengers around them began to whisper softly. Some were watching, others quietly recording. The husband felt a mixture of frustration and protectiveness rise inside him. This was supposed to be a simple flight, a trip to a new place. Instead, it was turning into a moment no one should have to face, especially not a pregnant woman. He reached his wife's side and gently took her hand. "What's going on?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but full of concern. She tried to explain, her voice trembling, about the argument with the flight attendant, the rude words and the push she had received. Hearing her story made his anger grow, but he kept his tone calm, wanting to stay in control for her sake. Without wasting a moment, the husband asked to speak with the captain. He wanted answers and wanted to make sure his wife was safe. The captain came forward and listened, but the husband quickly sensed something was wrong. The captain's polite words felt empty, like they were just for show. The husband knew they needed help from higher up. He pulled out his phone and made a call, not to a friend or family, but to someone in charge. The person on the other end listened carefully. The husband explained the situation clearly, telling the truth about what had happened to his wife and how the crew had responded. While waiting for a reply, the husband stayed close to his wife. He gave her quiet words of comfort, telling her she was strong and that he was going to make sure she was protected. The woman looked at him with grateful eyes, feeling a bit of relief in the middle of the stress. Other passengers began to notice the couple's determination. Some offered quiet support, others stayed silent but watched carefully. It was clear this wasn't just a private family matter anymore. It was something bigger. It was about fairness, respect, and standing up against bad behavior. Soon the husband's phone rang back. It was the airline's operations team. They had been informed of the situation and were taking it seriously. The husband was told that the airline was sending instructions to the crew on what to do next. At the same time, the husband turned to the captain and explained that the situation could not be ignored. The crew needed to be held accountable, and his wife's safety and dignity had to come first. The captain nodded but seemed reluctant. The husband didn't give up. Minutes later, the captain's radio crackled. The voice on the other end was firm and direct. Orders came from the airline's higher management. The flight was to be stopped from taking off until the matter was fully resolved. Passengers whispered among themselves, some looking surprised, others hopeful. The couple felt the tension shift. Justice was beginning to move forward. Within moments, security personnel and airline representatives arrived at the gate. They boarded the plane and approached the front where the crew was gathered. The pregnant woman watched from her seat, still holding her husband's hand. As the crew was told to leave the plane immediately, the flight attendant who had pushed the woman was among those asked to step off. Passengers around them quietly applauded or nodded in approval. The woman's heart began to calm. She felt a mixture of relief and validation. She was no longer alone, and the airline was finally taking action. New crew members were brought on board, selected carefully to ensure a safe and respectful environment for all passengers. The couple was moved to better seats near the front, closer to the nurse who stayed nearby offering quiet support and reassurance. The atmosphere on the plane began to change. What had been a moment filled with tension and fear now carried a feeling of hope. Passengers started talking softly, sharing their thoughts about standing up for what is right and how important it is to treat everyone with kindness. The pregnant woman rested her head gently on her husband's shoulder, feeling safe and protected for the first time in many hours. The journey had been difficult, but it was also a powerful reminder. It showed how courage, standing up for others, and speaking the truth can bring change. As the plane finally prepared to take off, the couple held hands tightly, ready to face the rest of their journey together, stronger, united, and hopeful for what lay ahead. After the new crew took over and the couple was settled in, the mood inside the plane began to shift. The pregnant woman felt a little more at ease now. The nurse passenger stayed close, checking in quietly from time to time to make sure she was comfortable. The husband held her hand gently, sharing small smiles and encouraging words. The flight attendants on the new crew were kind and patient. They offered water and asked if she needed anything special. The couple appreciated the change. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the painful moments and focus on the journey ahead. Even though the couple was tired from the stress, they were grateful. They knew that their voices had been heard and that standing up for themselves had made a difference. Other passengers around them also seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from the entire cabin. The woman thought about the moments before the flight had almost taken off, the sharp words, the uncomfortable looks, and the push. She could still feel the sting of that moment, but now it was mixed with hope. She looked at her husband, who was quietly watching her, his eyes full of care and support. During the flight, the woman and her husband talked quietly about what had happened. They discussed how important it was to stand up for themselves and others. They talked about kindness and respect, and how sometimes people forget to treat others the way they want to be treated. The woman said softly, "I never expected this to happen to me. I thought flying would be easy, even with the pregnancy. But I'm glad you were there." Her husband smiled. "We're a team. I'll always be there for you." Around them, the plane was calm. The new crew worked smoothly, serving drinks and snacks with smiles. The passengers seemed relaxed, some chatting quietly or watching movies on their screens. The atmosphere was peaceful now, very different from the tension before. A few passengers came over to the couple and offered words of support. One woman said, "You were so brave. It's not easy to stand up in a situation like that." Another passenger nodded. "It's good to see people caring. It makes a difference." The pregnant woman felt touched by these kind words. It reminded her that even though the experience had been hard, she was not alone. There were people who saw her, heard her, and cared. As the flight continued, the woman rested more. The nurse kept an eye on her, checking that she was feeling okay and offering water or snacks when needed. The husband sat close, ready to help at any moment. They both knew that this journey was about more than just traveling. It was about safety, dignity, and being treated with respect. The woman thought about how many other people might face similar situations, feeling small and powerless. She hoped that by sharing her story, she could help others feel stronger and encourage kindness everywhere. The couple looked forward to arriving at their destination, imagining a new beginning filled with peace and joy. They talked about the future, their hopes, and the life growing inside her. Even though the trip had started with difficulty, they knew they were stronger because of it. When the plane finally landed, the passengers applauded quietly. The pregnant woman smiled and squeezed her husband's hand, grateful for the support around her. The journey had been more than just a flight. It had been a lesson in courage, kindness, and standing up for what is right. As they gathered their bags and prepared to leave the plane, the woman felt a new strength inside her. She knew she would never forget this day, not for the hard parts, but for how she had faced them with courage and love. And as they walked off the plane together, ready to start the next chapter of their lives, they carried with them a simple but powerful truth. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness, no matter where they are or what they are going through. After the flight ended, the couple walked through the airport still holding hands tightly, The woman was tired but felt stronger than she had before. The events on the plane had been difficult, but she had learned a lot about standing up for herself and how important it was to have someone by her side. As they moved through the crowded terminal, the husband gently touched her belly, smiling softly. "Our baby is going to hear this story one day," he said quietly. She laughed softly, feeling comforted by his words, but their journey wasn't over yet. The incident with the flight attendant had caused a lot of attention. As they stepped into the arrival hall, they noticed reporters and cameras waiting nearby. Someone had shared the videos and the story, and it quickly became news. The couple wasn't used to this kind of attention. At first, they felt nervous and unsure about what to do. But then they realized that this was an important moment. Their experience wasn't just their story, it was a chance to make a difference for many others. The woman took a deep breath. Together, they agreed to speak to the reporters, but only to share the truth and to remind everyone about the importance of kindness and respect. When they stood in front of the cameras, the woman's voice was soft but strong. She talked about how scared she felt when the flight attendant treated her unfairly, and how important it was for people to understand that respect should come first, no matter what. Her husband spoke about how important it was to support loved ones and to speak up when something wrong happens. He said that standing up for someone isn't always easy, but it can change things. Their words touched many people watching. Social media quickly filled with messages of support and calls for better training for airline staff. Many passengers who had witnessed the event shared their own stories of unfair treatment or kindness during difficult moments. The airline company also responded publicly. They apologized for what happened and promised to improve their staff training and to ensure that every passenger would be treated with dignity and respect. They said they were investigating the incident thoroughly. The couple was invited to meetings and interviews to share their experience. At first, this felt overwhelming, but they realized that their story was helping others feel brave and heard. It was a reminder that even when bad things happen, speaking out can lead to change. During this time, the woman continued to take care of herself and the baby growing inside her. She visited doctors regularly and made sure to rest whenever she could. The support from her husband and the community around them made a big difference. One evening, after a long day of interviews and meetings, the couple sat quietly at home. They talked about how much had changed since that one difficult flight. The woman said, "I never thought a flight could teach me so much about courage and kindness." Her husband nodded. "And it's not just about that one moment. It's about how we carry it forward, making sure no one else has to feel the way you did." They both knew their journey wasn't just about traveling. It was about standing up for fairness and being kind to others, no matter the situation. As the days passed, the couple felt grateful for the support and the lessons they had learned. They looked forward to the future, hopeful that their story would inspire others to be brave and kind. The woman sometimes thought about the flight attendant who had treated her badly. She didn't want to hold on to anger, but she hoped that person would learn and change. Everyone deserves a chance to grow and do better. In the meantime, the couple focused on their new adventure, the life waiting for them as a family. They dreamed of the day they would meet their baby and share stories about how love and courage helped them through tough times. And through it all, they remembered one simple truth: no matter what happens, kindness and respect are always the right choice. After a few weeks had passed, life had started to settle down again. The couple had returned to their daily routine. The media attention had slowed, but their story still lived in the hearts of those who heard it. For many people, it wasn't just about a flight gone wrong. It was about how a moment of mistreatment turned into a message of strength, patience, and change. The woman, now further along in her pregnancy, was feeling better emotionally. The experience on the plane had affected her deeply, but she had slowly turned that pain into purpose. She had received messages from other women, some pregnant, some elderly, and others from different backgrounds, who shared how they had also been treated unfairly in public spaces. Reading those stories made her emotional. She didn't feel alone anymore. She realized that the problem was much bigger than just one flight or one rude crew member. It was about how people sometimes forget to treat each other with care and understanding, especially those who are most vulnerable. One morning, the woman sat with her husband at the kitchen table. They were drinking tea and talking quietly. The weather outside was calm, and the light from the window made everything feel peaceful. She looked at him and said, "Do you think we were meant to go through that? To speak for others who couldn't?" He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. Sometimes life gives us moments we don't expect just to show us what we're capable of." That day, the couple made a decision. They didn't want their story to fade away quietly. They wanted to use their experience to help others. They weren't famous or rich. They were just regular people who had been through something unfair. But maybe that's what made it powerful. People could relate to them. People believed them. They decided to start small. They reached out to a local community center and offered to speak at a public event. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small room with about 20 chairs, some snacks, and a warm atmosphere. The idea was to share their story honestly and allow others to share theirs too. When the evening came, the woman was a bit nervous. She wasn't used to speaking in front of a group, but her husband was right beside her. They stood together and told the story from beginning to end, not with anger but with truth. The audience listened carefully. Some nodded, others looked emotional, and a few even wiped away quiet tears. After they finished speaking, a few people in the crowd stood up to share their own experiences. One older woman talked about how she was once ignored on a train because of how she looked. A young man spoke about being judged at his workplace. A mother talked about how people often stare or whisper when her child, who has a disability, makes noise in public. Each story was different, but the feeling was the same. Everyone wanted to be treated like a human being. Everyone wanted to feel seen, heard, and respected. The couple went home that night feeling something shift in their hearts. This was no longer just about what happened to them. It was about creating something meaningful out of it, a space where people could feel safe to speak, to listen, and to grow. The next week, they were invited to speak at a nearby college. Then a small radio station called and asked for an interview. More messages started coming in from people around the country. Some wanted to thank them, others just wanted to talk. Even though the attention was never their goal, the couple handled everything with grace. They always kept their message simple: treat people with kindness, stand up when something isn't right, and never stay silent if someone is being hurt or disrespected. The woman, now in her final month of pregnancy, often rested more, but she still answered messages and joined events when she could. Her husband took on more responsibilities, always making sure she was comfortable and supported. One afternoon, as they walked through a local park, they sat down on a bench and watched children playing nearby. The woman rubbed her belly gently and smiled. "I hope our child grows up in a kinder world than we did." Her husband looked out at the trees and said, "If we keep doing our part, maybe that will happen." They were no longer just two people who had been wronged. They had become a voice for many. Their story had sparked conversations, and those conversations were creating slow but real change. Airlines started reviewing their staff behavior policies. Workshops were being organized in different places to teach people about empathy and customer care. One day, they received an unexpected letter. It was from a flight attendant, not the one who had caused the incident, but someone else. The letter was heartfelt. It said, "I saw your story. It made me think deeply. I've worked in this industry for years, and sometimes we forget that behind every seat is a person with feelings, a family, and a story. Your experience reminded me why I chose this job in the first place, to care for people. I'm sorry for what happened to you. Thank you for speaking up." The woman held the letter close and read it again and again. That single letter felt like healing, not because it erased what had happened, but because it showed that change was possible, one heart at a time. As her due date came closer, the couple took time to rest and prepare for their new chapter. They decorated the baby's room, folded tiny clothes, and spent quiet evenings dreaming about the future. One night, the husband looked at her and said, "You've been so strong through all of this. I'm proud of you." She smiled and replied, "I couldn't have done any of it without you. We faced it together." That night, as they sat in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, they felt something they hadn't felt in a while: peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had done something meaningful. They had turned pain into purpose, and now they were ready to welcome new life into the world with hearts full of love and hope. Their story wasn't just about one flight anymore. It was about standing up when it matters most. It was about being brave even when you're scared. And most importantly, it was about the power of kindness. How one act of care or one voice speaking out can change everything. And as they looked forward to holding their baby for the first time, they promised one thing to each other. They would raise their child to be strong, gentle, and never afraid to stand for what's right. It was a quiet morning when the woman felt the first sign. A soft pain in her lower back followed by a slight pressure. At first she thought it might just be part of the usual pregnancy discomfort. But within an hour the feeling grew stronger and more regular. Her time had finally come. She called out to her husband from the living room, her voice calm but a little nervous. "I think it's starting," she said softly, placing her hand on her belly. Her husband rushed over without a second thought. He didn't panic, he simply smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "Okay, let's do this. It's time to meet our baby." They had packed the hospital bag weeks ago. Everything was ready. The clothes, the baby blanket, the small cap. It had all been folded and placed with care. They left the house together, holding hands tightly. No words were needed. They just looked at each other and smiled, a mixture of excitement and love in their eyes. At the hospital, the nurses welcomed them warmly. One of the nurses had actually seen their story online. She smiled and whispered, "It's an honor to help you today." The woman was taken to a clean, quiet room where she could rest as the labor slowly progressed. Her husband stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, feeding her water, and making sure she was comfortable. Hours passed, filled with deep breaths, encouraging words, and soft music playing in the background. Labor was not easy. There were moments of pain, fear, and even a few tears. But through it all, the woman remained strong. She focused on her breathing, her baby, and her husband's steady voice guiding her through. Finally, after many long hours, the sound they had waited for filled the room, a soft, beautiful cry. The room fell silent for a moment, as if even the walls were holding their breath. The nurse gently placed the baby in the mother's arms, wrapped in a soft white blanket. The woman looked down and smiled, tears running freely down her cheeks. Her husband leaned in, overwhelmed, his eyes filled with emotion. They didn't say anything at first. They just stared at the tiny face, the little fingers, the soft breathing. A new life had begun. In that moment, all the pain, all the stress, all the fear from the flight and everything that followed, it faded. This tiny baby in their arms made it all worth it. The nurse looked at them and whispered, "You've been through so much. But look at what you've brought into the world. Pure love." The couple stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Friends and family called and sent messages, and people who had followed their story online sent well wishes too. The woman received letters from other mothers who said they felt inspired by her courage, and many said they had found the strength to speak up about their own experiences after hearing her story. But the couple didn't think of themselves as heroes. They were just two people who had gone through a tough moment and chose not to stay silent. Back home, life slowly began to find a new rhythm. The baby kept them busy, feeding, changing, sleeping, and crying in the middle of the night. But through the tiredness, there was joy. There was laughter. There was peace. One evening, after putting the baby to sleep, the couple sat on the sofa drinking tea. The room was dim, quiet except for the baby monitor on the table. The woman turned to her husband and said, "Do you think the world really changed because of what happened to us?" He thought for a second, then replied, "Maybe not the whole world, but for some people it did. And for our child it means they'll grow up in a world where their parents stood up for what's right." She nodded slowly, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just hope they never have to face something like that." Her husband placed his arm around her. "And if they do, we'll be there, just like we were for each other." In the following weeks, the airline reached out again. They wanted to share updates. The crew involved in the incident had been removed from customer-facing roles and placed in further training. The airline had launched a new program focused on empathy and handling sensitive situations. They even asked the couple if they'd be willing to help design a small part of the training by sharing their perspective. It wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about growth. The couple agreed, not to shame anyone, but to help others learn. They visited the airline's main office for a private meeting. The staff welcomed them respectfully. A few employees even thanked them for their bravery. "We didn't realize how much our small actions affect people," one staff member said. The woman sat down in a meeting room holding her baby and spoke honestly. She didn't use big words or harsh language. She just talked about what it felt like to be pregnant, scared, and treated poorly when she needed help the most. Her voice was gentle, but it touched everyone in the room. The company promised to do better, not just for her, but for every passenger going forward. After the meeting, as they walked out with their baby in the stroller, the husband looked up at the sky and smiled. Who would have thought one flight would lead us here? The woman laughed lightly. It was more than just a flight. It was a test. One we passed together. Months passed. Seasons changed. Their baby grew, learned to smile, to laugh, to reach out with tiny fingers and grab their shirts. Every milestone was a reminder that life goes on, and love heals even the deepest wounds. And sometimes, when the woman sat by the window feeding her child, she'd think about the flight, not with anger, but with gratitude, because it showed her how strong she could be, how powerful her voice was, and how love, when shared openly, can ripple out and touch many lives. The story didn't end at the airport. It didn't end with a landing or a letter. It continued in every small moment of kindness they showed others. It lived in their decision to raise their child with empathy, courage, and the strength to speak up when something is wrong. Because in the end, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what they chose to do afterward.